Hey guys, in this video I'll show you how to build and play a Dragonknight tank, if you're a beginner. I'll be covering mostly stuff like skills and gear that you should use. If you want to learn more about the very basics of tanking, I made a separate video and a website guide about it. Speaking of which, this beginner Dragonknight guide is also on my website, so if you prefer written guides, you can read it there instead. Dragonknights have access to an absurd amount of useful tools when it comes to tanking. They have access to hardened armor, a very strong and at the same time extremely cheap damage shield, which shields you for 31% of your max HP while costing only 2600 magicka. They also have access to Helping Hands, a passive which restores your stamina whenever you use an Earthenheart ability, which you'll be proccing with Ignis Shield, and it will trivialize sustaining stamina, which is why DK is such an easy and beginner friendly class. The Iron Skin and Scaled Armor passes grant you block mitigation and armor, which are extremely important stats for a tank. But enough about defense. Dragonknights also provide a unique stagger debuff, which increases the target's damage taken, a unique Engulfing Flames debuff, which increases enemies' flame damage taken, and the unique Minor Brutality buff, which increases the group's weapon damage by 10%. This is the skill setup you're going to use. The first skill is Shield Throw, with the Taunt, Sage's Remedy, and Maim script combination on it. If you do not have access to scribing, you should replace Shield Throw with Pierce Armor. You will also have to replace Elemental Susceptibility with Destructive Clench, but we'll get to that later. Next is Stone Giant. This skill provides around a 4% damage increase, but it can be dangerous to use. It has a cast time during which you cannot block, and it costs stamina, which might ruin your stamina sustain, and prevent you from blocking entirely. It can also be applied by Dragonknight Damage Dealer instead, in which case you don't need to use it. So if you want safety or if someone else is using Stone Giant, you can instead use Soul Burst, Defensive Stance, or Revealing Flare. If you end up using Soul Burst, you should use Damage Shield, Crusader's Defiance, and Courage combination on it. Ignis Shield is a rather weak damage shield compared to others, but it will proc the Helping Hands passive, helping you a lot with the stamina sustain. Next we have Ulfsild's Contingency, and you should use the Damage Shield, Gladiator's Tenacity, and Intellect and Endurance combination on it. Use the Defensive Stance, Revealing Flare, Engulfing Flames, or Heroic Slash instead of Ulfsild's Contingency, if you don't have access to scribing. Coagulating Blood is your main self-heal. Temporal Guard ultimate isn't meant to be cast. It's there to passively grant you minor protection, reducing your damage taken by 5%. Magma Shell makes you almost immortal for 12 seconds, and is another great defensive ultimate. They're both selfish ultimates, and the choice here is between passively making your survival easier, with Temporal Guard's damage reduction, or having access to an emergency button with Magma Shell. Hardened Armor is your source of major resolve, and a very strong and cheap damage shield. In fights where you don't need damage shields, so fights with primarily direct blockable damage and very few or no dots, you can use Balance instead, to massively improve your magicka sustain. Next skill is Wield Soul, and you should use the Pull, Druid's Resurgence, and Cowardice combination on it. If you do not have access to scribing, you should use Unrelenting Grip instead. Elemental Susceptibility provides lots of very important debuffs, and it will also improve your sustain by proccing the Combustion passive. As I said at the beginning of the skill section, if you do not have access to scribing, you should replace it with Destructive Clench, so that you still have access to a Range Taunt, with Major Maim. Elemental Blockade will constantly proc your Crusher enchant. Resolving Vigor is a very strong heal over time, and it also grants you access to a crucial Minor Resolve buff. The Aggressive Horn ultimate will grant you and your teammates a 10% maximum stamina and magicka buff for 30 seconds, which is roughly a 2.5% damage increase. It will also grant everyone a shorter 10-second Major Force buff, which increases critical damage by 20%, and is roughly an 8% damage increase. And last few things, as much as I'm trying to make it a single setup, there will be fights where you will just have to slot some situational stuff. You will have to slot Crushing Shock for fights that require ranged interrupts, such as Turvokun in Fangler Dungeon, or Ansul in Sanity's Edge Trial. And you'll have to slot Immovable for fights that require lots of block mitigation, such as Archdruid Devrik in Erdenroot Enclave Dungeon, or Zalvaka in Rokurov Trial. This is the crafted gear setup you can start with. You do not need to start with a crafted setup, and you can move on straight to the setup from dungeons, because normal difficulty dungeons are easy enough to clear while wearing random gear pieces you pick up from questing. This crafted setup is for people who are anxious about tanking, and need a stepping stone setup, even though it isn't really needed. Sets like Fortified Brass or Central Defender, though this one is from Overland, not crafted, can be better than Druid's Braid, but Druid's Braid has the benefit of not becoming mostly useless when you stop wearing 5 pieces of it. And it's important because I can't know what content you're going to farm first. Are you going to get a monster set first and replace head and shoulder slots? Or are you replacing weapons and jewelry first? With Druid's Braid, it doesn't matter, because it's slowly losing effectiveness piece by piece. The Druid's Braid shield will also stay relevant for you, even past your beginner phase. Now this is a starting setup you can get from dungeons. Turning Tide drops from normal or veteran Shipwright's Regret. Crimson Oath's Rive drops from normal or veteran the Dreadcellar. Tremor Scale drops from veteran Volenfell. Trainee drops from starter zones. Druid's Braid is crafted. Replace Trainee and Druid's Braid with Puncturing Remedy, which drops from normal or veteran Dragonstar Arena, if you don't have access to scribing and are using Pierce Armor. Tri-stat enchants are better than single-stat ones, but they're extremely expensive. And the reason I listed them here, but not in the crafted setup, is because Tremor Scale and Turning Tide will stay relevant past your beginner phase. So if you can afford tri-stat enchants, you should go for it. This is the setup for dungeons, and here's a few more options. Use Puncturing Remedy on your front bar if you're using Pierce Armor. Use Vestments of Olorim instead of Powerful Assault if you're playing without a healer, in a 1 tank 3 damage dealers group comp. Turning Tide is a decent alternative for Loosened Echoes. War Machine is a decent alternative for Powerful Assault. Crimson Oath's Rive is also a decent alternative for Powerful Assault, but it will be useless for damage dealers who already brought enough armor penetration on their own. This is the setup for Pack Trials as a main tank. This setup is a recommendation for random pack groups. In an organized trial, always listen to what the raid lead wants you to wear, rather than what I'm showing here. Same as last time, use Puncturing Remedy on your front bar, if you're using Pierce Armor. Crimson Oath's Rive has 2 bonus armor lines, which together will grant you 2974 additional armor. This might allow you to shift armor in other parts of your build, like for example switching off of the Lady Mundus, or changing Fortified or Bulwark champion points to something different. Crimson Oath's Rive will be rendered useless if a damage dealer in your group is wearing Alkosh, but it's very unlikely you'll find a damage dealer wearing a support set in a random pack group. And this is the setup for Pack Trials as an off-tank. Same as last time, this is just a recommendation. So in an organized trial, always listen to what the raid wants you to wear, rather than what I'm showing here. Once again, use Puncturing Remedy on your front bar if you're using Pierce Armor. Saxo's Champion allows you to provide major force with any ultimate, so you can change your Bugbear ultimate from Aggressive Horn to Replenishing Barrier or Magma Shell, and you'll only lose out on the Horn resource buff, while providing a defensive ultimate for you and your group. Moving on to champion points. On your blue tree, you should use Ironclad, Duelist Rebuff, Enduring Resolve, and Bulwark. On your red tree, you should use Boundless Vitality, Fortified, Bastion, and Bracing Anchor. If you're a Nord with fully golded out gear and proper traits, you will be over the armor cap of these champion points, so you can replace either Bulwark or Fortified. You could replace them with, for example, Focus Mending, Unassailable, Rejuvenation, Shieldmaster, Sustained by Suffering, or Wardmaster. Moving on to race. Nord is by far the best race for tanking, due to the increased armor from Rugged and ulti generation from Stalwart. You can complete any content on any race. You will just have to work slightly harder with other races, and you'll have to adjust your build and get more armor from somewhere else. Now moving on to Mundus. The best Mundus is the Achnak, which increases your magical recovery by 310, and causes your armor pieces with the Divine trait to increase it by another 28. If you're struggling with reaching the armor cap of 33,000, then the Lady can also be a decent choice. It increases your armor by 2,744. Moving on to attributes. Majority of the times, you should put all your points into health. However, you need your max stamina to be higher than your max magicka, because the combustion synergy restores your dominant resource, and you want it to be stamina. Because of that, you might have to put some attribute points into stamina, if you have passives, such as for example the Gift of Magnus Racial, or items with bonuses, such as for example 1-piece bonus of Encratis' Behemoth, that increase your max magicka. Put just enough points to make your max stamina higher than your max magicka, and then put the rest into health. Now moving on to food. The best food is Orzorga's Smoked Bear Haunch. However, it's extremely expensive, so you should use Jewels of Misrule instead. It provides only slightly lower stats than Orzorga, while being significantly cheaper. As for other useful foods, we have Orzorga's Red Frofgar, which provides more max health and magical recovery, at the cost of providing no stamina recovery at all. Stamina recovery doesn't work while blocking, so it can be a decent option if you're perma-blocking. Bewitched Sugar Skulls provides maximum resources instead of recoveries. It can be decent for fights where you need to block for a very long time during a very specific period, but the pressure is non-existent outside of that specific period, so you can recuperate stamina by heavy attacking freely. Like for example, Roxa the Warped boss in Balsunar dungeon. The increased maximum resources will also increase the scaling of some of your healing abilities, such as Resolving Vigor. And the last one is Candid Jester's Coin. Provides only max stamina and magic recovery. It can be decent when you want to reduce your max health during a specific phase of a fight. For example in Cloud Rest. You can eat it right as the execute phase starts, because maximum health becomes a detriment due to the Baneful Mark mechanic. Moving on to potions. Most of the time, you should use the Tri-Stat potions, which restore health, stamina, magicka, and increase all the recoveries. They will greatly improve your sustain. You can craft them by combining Columbine, Baglos, and Mountain's Flower. There are better potions, but they're extremely expensive, so they're only worth using when you're tryharding for the most difficult achievements, such as Trial Trifectas. Heroism potions can provide 100% uptime on minor heroism buff, which generates ultimate, but they're extremely expensive because they're crafted by combining Dragonrium, Dragon's Blood, and Columbine. And that's it for this video. If you have any more questions, you can comment down below, or join our Discord server Wildheart. As always, feedback will be appreciated. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to my channel and check out my Twitch. Thanks for watching and see you next time.